So today I want to talk about conceptual rendering. There's a little bit of howling. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Today I'm going to be talking about conceptual rendering, and I am evidently slightly nervous since it's the first time speaking to this many people ever. So thank you for showing up and making me very, very nervous. Thank you. Thank you. Today, I'm going to talk about the power of non-photoreal visualization. And I say non-photoreal because I'm going slightly opposite direction of photoreal. So if you are going for something photoreal, you might want to slightly reduce the number of the crowd. So I think the conceptual rendering is a visual communication tool. I don't know how many of you were in a grand speech there, but I think as a designer, architects, we really have to communicate in sort of visual manner. We can talk about great architecture. I come from architectural background, so I speak of architect, and a number of you may be architect as well, but I think it's important that we speak in visual aspects. We communicate design in visuals. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about, and it is easy to make, and it is very effective in conveying your ideas. So let me just go ahead and skip to the next page. Okay, so my name is Joseph Kim. I am architectural designer / technology enthusiast. I say technology enthusiast because I have these fancy equipments with me all the time. I have been using SketchUp since 2007, so just kind of say I've started from university and I've been using it since. So I have 5-year plus experience in architectural design, just big architectural firm. You may see the name throughout the presentation. And I also do design as like a freelancer. So design or 3D modeling, visualization, I kind of consult and help people, artists, designer as well, and architects. And I generally enjoy sharing. So my sort of mantra or motto is to share what I know, and perhaps you like it, you don't, take it, you don't, but I just like sharing. So thus, I upload videos online, YouTube, for you guys to watch. So that's just a little cue saying, go watch my videos and subscribe. And here's a little preview. So I made this video. I don't think there's a sound since, it's coming out of my laptop.
Slightly sideways. So this is...
But sound is definitely not important here. So just my video that I uploaded on YouTube yesterday morning, just covering Monday and Tuesday, but I just like sharing, and this was just my travel series. I just wanted to share what the vibe is like and have famous Aaron in the video so that I get a little bit more subscription too. All right, so I'm gonna exit out of that. So you can just do that on your downtime. So I ask, show of hands if you are an architect or designer, perhaps. Oh, mostly. Good, thank you. I found the right crowd and you found the right speaker, I think. And show of hands if you do rendering daily. Okay. How many of you do photorealistic rendering? Okay. So you did not leave for some reason. All right. I'm not against photoreal rendering. It's just that I think design workflow, I'll just go over it. But so that is what I wanted to ask. And also, whilst that, since we had larger crowds who were architects or designers, I'm just going to attempt this because I wanted to prove to the fact that a lot of people have to listen to me talking for an hour. So I'm just going to a little bit of selfie. So how many of you were architects or designers? Yeah, that's what I wanted. Thank you very much. All right, just YouTube. All right, thank you very much. I think that'll make a great video. And I'm gonna try and post one at the end of the week so you guys can watch, kind of re-digest what has gone on for the past week or so. So, design communication. I actually wrote this before Grant's speech. I don't know how much you actually liked his speech or whatever, but I really agreed. I kind of grew up watching Mythbusters and his show, so I was really thrilled. I was so anxious to see him, so I walked up and was trying to get a selfie. I forgot to hit record button. And I came out, I realized that I went back in and did it again. So I asked like, nice to see you again. Yeah, and this is my YouTube channel and everything. So yeah, it was, and I agree with him being visual and doing design communication. When you're thinking visual. So I am a very visual person as well. So in general, architects and designers, a lot in this room, we communicate in visuals. We communicate ideas. We can say great architecture, but what does great architecture mean? What does it? It's kind of difficult to tell all that story in words. So I have to point out the fact that not all clients are drawing savvy, I have to say. Like plan sections, they look at them, what does this mean? You might be talking to a developer who's very savvy in those matters, but you might be talking to a private residential client who's never seen plans like that before, just like seeking a new home. They might see in the plan, but they're not sure what they're looking at. So it's often difficult communicating your design through just pure architectural drawing. Now, when the client goes, show me your design, then you really have to show. You can't really just bust out a plan and just expect them to understand what you're trying to make. So, traditionally, we've used something like this. You bust out a tracing paper and just draw a pretty picture or lines. I think this person has put a bit more time than I usually would or any designer would, but yeah, you bust out, and this is what you are thinking of or what you're seeing, what you're dreaming of, what you're trying to show to your colleague, yourself, or the client. So we talk through sketches, and I've been taught to do cute little diagrams like this in school. So that's what I did, and that's what I did in practice. Cute little diagrams showing and demonstrating the process. We do that. Now, and here everything's made in SketchUp to tick that box. SketchUp, and then maybe different softwares like Illustrator you touch up on and then create these sort of different diagrams to explain your story. And then you're also told to take black and white picture of your model. Why black and white? I don't know. That's what I've been told to do. Whether it be handmade or semi-handmade, like laser cut, CNC, whatever it may be. We've been told to do this so that people can kind of see what you're trying to build, whether it be diagrammatic or not. And this is another physical model that I made in school. Yes, it does not have handrails. I ran out of time. And the finals came along and sleepless night. And I did glue every single piece of those threads. And I spent a lot of time cutting that as well as gluing. And so that is to mention, it is time consuming. It takes time and effort and patience. And yeah, and inevitably you run out of time too. So you do that. And if you went to school sometime in the era of when I did, you were not recommended, but sort of advised in a way, or maybe encouraged to do some visual rendering or some perspective view, we called. You can do hand-drawn stuff, but it was at that time, fancier to do renderings. So this was the same model. This one is not missing handrails. I had that figured out. And it still was time consuming, but not as much. So these are just aiding in showing aspect, visualizing aspect. So you can do fancier one, which is kind of cut, exploded, ISO, axonometric, which it may be in all the annotations to tag what the hell is going on in there. And you can do all of this fancy stuff using this different visualization softwares, whether it be Photoshop or other softwares that I may or may not mention. So this is a typical, I don't know, architectural single residential building that you may see. Now, we can kind of chew through this by, since you're architects and designers, just look at it and we can just kind of understand the space. But it does take a few moments to really understand what is going on in this picture. And it's not like not typical, so you can just kind of understand that. But to some clients, if you're doing this for the first time, probably are, only time, probably, these things are kind of difficult to tell and show. So it has a lot of accurate information. It's labeled properly. It probably has a lot of good dimensions to it. Maybe not on this one, but usually it does. But it's crowded with information. It's hard to nail down what you're looking for exactly. And clients, maybe your coworkers too, struggle in doing so. So it takes a few moments to understand. However, if you see a drawing like this, if you show a drawing like this to your client, you can immediately understand what's going on. You can immediately point out where dining room is, whether that is adjacent to living or not. It's easy to tell where is the conservatory or carport. It's easy to point out those things. There's less information in terms of like measurements, the dimensions, the distance scale is not necessarily there. It's relative. However, it is clear in what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to state and show the zones, the areas of my building or someone else's building in this case. But as a designer, it's easy to highlight those information since this is somewhat diagrammatic, I would say perspective plan with shadows turned on if you want to like classify. So this diagrammatic approach will kind of help clients visualize. And next one. And because I made the previous one in SketchUp, you can immediately have something like this if you just orbit around and just take out the section that I just made. So 3D model became more common. And hopefully, if you're using SketchUp, you are doing 3D. So we're doing visual creations in SketchUp by creating this and perhaps cutting in plane so that you show sort of a planar views. So that's sort of a standard practice for any SketchUppers out there. Actually, how many use SketchUp daily out of? Yeah, so I can just kind of say we do all together. Okay. So the question is rendering. That's the second word of my presentation, so conceptual rendering. So I want to classify what rendering is. Is a one way to communicate to designers, and by definition, rendering is the automatic process of generating a photorealistic or non-photorealistic image from 2D or 3D by the means of computer programs. I did not have to read that. You can just go to Wiki. But I just wanted to highlight those facts. Okay? So when you look at renderings, we tend to think CGI. CGI is computer-generated imagery, it says, or visualization. And when we think of rendering, we tend to think of perhaps less photoreal than this because this is very, very good. Like hyper photorealistic image that's almost an art piece. I give full credit to this person who's credited here. It's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful house, although it's a bit subjective in some ways. It's a great architectural rendering, I would say. It's hyper photoreal image that is almost difficult to tell apart from a photo. If I told you this was a photo, most of you might have believed it. I probably did too. I only just know because this person who made it said it was rendering. Maybe this one's slightly easier to give away, but still very beautiful. Commercial areas are more difficult too because there's a lot more components going on. It takes skills and time and effort to make something like this. It's a very good quality. If you ask me, I can't do it. So that's kind of why I give you a heads up. I'm not going to go there, so if you're looking for that, you're not in the right place. However, there's a good composition, there's a good storytelling. It's almost an art piece. If you look at something like this, it's beautiful, poetic, everything. And not to mention it is expensive to make because those skillful people are hard to look for and they know their price. If you get what you pay for, don't you? So, and we tend to do this once at the end of the project when everything's finalized, when right before going construction, just really to sell our project. We talk to clients and say, we're going to get this wonderful visual and I'm going to show it to you and I'm going to ship it off to China and have someone do this for us. Or I don't know, maybe someone in the United States who can do it, but it will probably be a lot more expensive than someone who can do it in China. So it is classified as finished product. It's difficult to do this whilst the iterations of designs as a work in progress. And it's often used as a publication or marketing purposes. And the accuracy of form and materials is like spot on. It has to be right. And it takes skills, again, and time and effort to do so. And it is often developed by third party. You can do it in-house, but you need those skillful people and time in-house and, again, money. And people doing that in-house all the time. So I want to highlight the fact that there is non-photorealistic aspect to rendering. Although we tend to think of the more realistic version of it when we mention the rendering. So I use the word conceptual because non-photorealistic sounds somewhat unfinished, unpolished. Although it might be true, but I just didn't want to say non-photorealistic rendering because, I don't know, it doesn't sound cool. And if you go to SketchUp's own website, I don't know if it still is up, but something like this would show up. Is Richard in here? Never mind. He kind of asked me to do this one too. Helpful. These sort of visuals are helpful because you kind of understand what's going on, but it's not photorealistic per se. It's outlined, it's kind of crude in a way, sketchy. But SketchUp does this by its nature, and it's a great visual tool. And you often see something like watercolor-ish, washed out, faded out images. And sometimes I've heard people calling it like a semi-rendering or some sort. And I think that's sort of a conceptual rendering in that regards. So this is an example of conceptual rendering, or what I consider as conceptual rendering. It's semi-rendering, kind of sketchy, outlined, unpolished, non-photorealistic. Those are just a bunch of adjectives describing this. So you use this to communicate your design. And it kind of has my own style, which I kind of developed over the days. This was developed several years ago, so my kind of style moved on, but I think it worked for its own purpose. If you look at it, it's not perhaps the prettiest, but it gets the job done. And have you noticed the ceiling and skylight design here? Yeah, it's got shape, right? We immediately recognize those facts. And have you noticed that this is a shopping mall? There's not much of a clue in that, but where else would you see these sort of things lined up like that, a lot of people like that? So it is a shopping mall, but it's not as highlighted. And, but there's no shop fronts to give away that. And there is a white silhouettes of people. Why is that? And I'm gonna cover that a little bit later on different visuals. But I just want to highlight those facts that I just laid out. And it is, in comparison to photorealistic rendering, it is work in progress. It is a visual communication tool, and it informs the space. It's a spatial quality, the design. And evidently, it takes less time and effort. There's less material, less shapes, less detail, therefore less time and effort, and less money. And it can be done in-house because of that. So this is imagery from my previous practice, and there's a lot of people in shop front. So yeah, it is a shopping mall, we can kind of see that. But it has very similar or the same ceiling, skylight, bulkhead-ish design. So you'll notice the foreground people who's walking around looking down on the void. And I have to mention, this was a project in Middle East, and I am sorry, but those clothing that shows shoulders and the skirts and those things are not really acceptable. So if you put down something like this, you get a red line saying, please replace those people. And often they'll replace them, but sometimes they just draw clothing on top of them, and I have trouble with fixing that up. So for this, yeah, you take more time and effort in making because you have to go back and forth, and there's a time in producing as well. However, similar visual quality, but I can count at least 3 people in this, but they're very subtle, they're hard to find. So they're just there to just kind of give you a scale, but not as present. They're somewhat transparent, translucent, they're just sort of hidden. So you see kind of heads, if you're having trouble finding them, there's heads around the void after the balustrades. So this is what I also consider as conceptual rendering, and my focus is on design, not the people, although I made you look. My focus is on skylight, the dangling things on the sky, and the ceiling, the bulkhead design. That's my focus. I'm gonna ask my client saying, do you like this? And if they don't, we're gonna go fix it. And I want to do that not after making the finalized rendering. And there's a little bit of materiality. Anyone can spot out where the wood is. And it's not perhaps the right color, not right scale of the slats, but enough to say it is wood. And that's all I need. I'm saying my ceiling is going to be made out of wood. The finish is going to be wood. That's what I want to say. And that's my design. So the form, the shape, and the feel of the space is all there. And that's what architecture is. That's what design is. I'm not trying to sell different things. So this is another photorealistic, semi-photorealistic render, which has a lot of people and the shop fronts around. The roof and the ceiling is not as highlighted because of other elements that is within the space. However, in comparison, this one, people kind of fade out. There are people, if you can't see it, you can look for it. A car is there. They're more contrasty than I would have wanted it, but kind of left it there. But what I'm trying to highlight here is the roof, the ceiling, the concaving curvature, as well as the undulating. That's the beauty that I want to sell. In this massive space, if you see lights highlighting and these beautiful curvature, what would it be like? And that's the design that I'm trying to convey to my client, my colleague, whether they like it or not. I just want to show them and see if they agree. So with this, you can get feedbacks from clients or your colleagues, whether it be your boss or manager. They can just scratch it, do something else, but I still got a meaningful answer. And in plans and sections, if you try to show this in plans and sections, client's not going to understand what is going on. You can't show this in plan, only just the concaving shape of a mall, but not the undulating roof. In a section, you can kind of show that, but not the concaving shape of the mall. So it's kind of difficult to show all of that other than conceptual rendering like this. So this is another example of conceptual rendering. Notice again, sort of white silhouetted people kind of fade into background, but there's warmth. Anybody notice the pink weird structure on the facade or the glass glazing? And it is two-story space. So there's a mezzanine level of restaurant you might have noticed. So it is not photoreal, but the mood and the general story of my design is there. I can convey that. Yes, please.
So, can you walk us through how you put this together? Obviously, SketchUp is used, but like,
what am I using? How am I doing?
How did you get?
It's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, thank you. And I'll give you time to ask questions. I'm just going to try and jump through all of this. I appreciate that, though. So you can, as a conceptual renderer, you can do an aerial shot, too. It doesn't have to be eye level all the time. You can just show overall configuration of your landscape. And I would still consider this as like a conceptual rendering because it is not photoreal. But to tell the story of my landscape design, this is useful. Another, excuse me, another example of conceptual rendering where things adjacent is not photoreal. Yeah, there is a lot of materiality in it, but it overall shows a general configuration of the kiosk that I'm putting in this food hall or food court area, and the design that I'm trying to convey, the colors, the tone, the mood, and it is definitely not photoreal per se. This is another example of conceptual rendering where a lot of materials are left blank. It's white, kind of clean, but there's enough of light and shadow to convey the idea of the space, what that might be with materials on. And again, this is a shopping mall, and it's, yeah, you see the shop fronts and all, but it's not conveyed that. You notice the yellow ceiling stuff that is going on. So minimum details on other things that I don't want to focus on, but you see the shape of the bulkheads and the ceiling element. In contrast, when you go to photoreal type, your eyes are drawn into dark paving, people walking around. We are people and we are drawn to people. So we look for faces, whether we like it or not, we look for people. And that's somewhat distracting when you're trying to tell a story about your design. So this is very good for marketing when you're trying to sell your project, but not necessarily for evaluation, not during the process of design. So the process. So this is, I'm just going to try and demonstrate the typical process for in-house conceptual rendering, and do understand when if it takes a little bit of time, but I'm going to try and do it as fast as I can. So if you miss something whilst I'm doing it because it was just too fast, or I just don't really understand because you don't do enough of rendering or just don't have any experience, you can also find me on YouTube, ask me questions, or I might already have a video explaining it, so it might be helpful. So I just wanted to say that. So this is what the model looks like on SketchUp. And then I'm going to go into how to render that up first. So there were a few sessions having this dialogue open. I see Noel there, and hi. So what you do is I take default stuff because it's just the easiest. It's kind of difficult covering every single values that are there in this dialog, so I'll just take default and just update my dimensions in a render output. So let me just show you the process. So I just click on SketchUp. This is just a scene that I have set up. Notice there's almost none of materiality. There's a glass material that's gone in, or transparent material that's gone in onto windows. So the story here that I'm trying to tell is, yes, there's a stairs going upstairs, but I wanted to convince my client, let's say I wanted to convince my client saying there's an ambient light or just sort of soft light that is coming from right side of, which is kind of kitchen area, and there has a balcony, and there's a lot of light flooding in, but the entrance area, which is towards the left, may have less light coming in because of the orientation of the house, but it's more intimate, and that's sort of the entry that client wanted, and I put down. But it's difficult to convey that here because you don't see the effect of light or shadow. You can put down the shadow that's in SketchUp, but it strikes a very hard line, and it's hard to see the light. You only see the shadow. So you can just open up V-Ray Asset Editor, and I'm just taking default values. There's no fancy, I just turned on denoiser just so that things are more soft, not as noisy, and just click on render away. So it's just gonna do its own calculation. How many of you use V-Ray? So you just click on render and just wait. You can push it to the cloud and things would be much faster than my laptop here, but what I'm just trying to say is you can kind of preview your image here. So you'll notice the right side is much brighter and darker on the other side. And that's exactly what I wanted to convey to my clients. So there's a story that I want to say, and my image has to sort of reflect that. And you don't need material, you don't need realistic everything, but still it conveys my idea. Now, whilst it is rendering up, I'm just going to go back to my slides and just say, keep it loose when you're trying to develop these things, because you have a high chance of doing another iteration on top of this. So the client's going to say, no, that's not enough for windows, punch more holes so that I get more light, or something like, oh, I don't think that stairs is working, so can we do something else? So keep it loose so that you can actually embrace for impact that come up. And focus on the design. Focus on something that you want to sell, something that you want to tell the story of. And less details, less materials will be helpful because it takes more time to render if you have a lot more materials and values to it. And also, it'll take more time to model altogether. And use very smart entourages. Like, you want to use people in subtle places just so that you understand scale of the things, but not obtrusive, not something that it's in your face, because you don't want to focus on people. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to sell your design. And work on your composition. Kind of photography aspect comes in here. If you generally show a bad image, then your design is not going to sell well. And I just added this last line after Grant's presentation. So room for iterations, which is I just said earlier. So embrace for failures. So this is just a direct comparison between SketchUp image versus what I get from V-Ray, where it has softer light that is coming in as well as the shadow. And let me see if it has finished. Yep, it says finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna go to desktop and save as 01. I'm just gonna say render. Okay, and another thing I'm going to do is the outline part. I want the outlines because I want this to be finished something like this. Now, if you look at the image that I just rendered up, it's somewhat soft in certain areas, although I did turn on the ambient occlusion. Sometimes it kind of loses that detail. So what I do here is I go to View in SketchUp, and then Face Style, Hidden Line, and then I go into this sort of black and white mode where there's no difference between vertical and the ceiling or floor surfaces, vertical versus horizontal surfaces. It's kind of hard to tell, but all I'm needing is the outlines, and I can also go into styles because these cylinders are not getting the outlines, and I want that. So I can go to here, Edit, and then just turn on profiles, and then those will come on. Now, after I do that, File, Export, 2D Graphic, make sure you put down as an option something of meaningful pixels. The reason why I do this is because by default, you will have use view size. If you do that, your lines come out very thick. If you want light and soft edges, which are looking more elegant, you want to put down larger number. Although you're not going to utilize all 4,000 pixels, I generally like somewhere 4,000, 6,000, my preference, but you can take it away. So uncheck that, 4,000 across, and it's just going to respect whatever the ratio of viewport that I have, better quality anti-alias, and OK. I'm just going to save it onto the same spot. This is the image I already saved before, but I'm going to say 01, and then lines, and export. And once I do that, I should open up Photoshop and see how I'm going to line all of that up. So there's a little trick to it. Some of you may know or may not know, but there's a large crowd that I'm aware who's not so familiar with those things. So I'm just going to quickly go over that. And again, this part I do have in my YouTube tutorial, so you may be able to look at that. So what I'm doing here is just drag and drop, just so that it comes in as a smart layer. Some of you may know or may not know. And the resolution that I had put down for the rendering was, there's a howling, 1280 by 720, so that's what I want to put down as. So if I go back here, and on the width, instead of percentage, I can right click or just say 1280 width px, and it just lines it up perfectly to that spot. But I want height to be adjusted in relative to this, so I just click on this, and it just lines it up perfectly on that spot, and I can click on this one or just hit enter, and then it just accepts that position. Now do a magical blending mode of multiply, and it just lines up perfectly. It's a bit thicker than I would like, also bolder than I would like, so I can just scrub on this opacity text here and just bring it down altogether. And then there you go, the softer outlines. If I want to take away those edges, I can just go on full Photoshop mode of masking away and then just deleting those parts away. Or if you want softer brush, you can do so. But I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, so you can do that. And there's a softer image in general. And I'm just going to go here, which is was the result in sort of higher resolution. Any questions so far? And if you do, you can just go for my website or YouTube again. So there is then real-time rendering that kind of came along. So that is different from what V-Ray is utilizing. Real-time rendering meaning whatever, so you don't have to wait so long for rendering. You can just see the result right away, is real-time rendering. And then there's aspect of motion because you can quickly change things and you can include motion within your rendering. And that allows better understanding of the space. And I will demonstrate why. And also it demonstrates the scale much better. And real-time rendering is crucial to maintain interactive design workflow. So you can just keep on iterating without waiting so long and parking it away and sending it off to someone to handle all the rendering for you. So this is an example that I made in Lumion using sort of outlined edges and emissive materials. So there's some more materials that has gone in here, and I'm just gonna pull that Lumion model up. Hopefully, yep. So there's aspect of motion in here again. And the reason why that's important because as you move around, okay, I'll just keep going. As you move around, you start to get sense of space, the distance between you from the pond to the building that is in the background. That becomes more evident as opposed to just a flat image. So that's why I like just keep on moving a little bit, ever so slightly, so that you start to see the distance and the scale of things, distance between the trees and the building. And if you do that to your client, the client immediately starts to understand how the space is working all together, whereas flat image is kind of hard to convey that idea. Here, I'm not sure what the space is like inside of the building because you kind of see it, but then you're not sure the scale of things. Whereas here, if you start to move things around, you can kind of gauge what's inside, how big the space is, and so on. So you can export images out of Lumion that way, and you'll get images something like this. You can use something called Live Sync to synchronize your view between the Lumion model as well as your SketchUp model and see all the changes that you make on SketchUp side, on Lumion as well. I have worked in that method too, but generally Lumion was created as an import and export method where you take the model and implement, and then you start to put people, trees, cars, the entourages in Lumion and develop the image that way inside of the Lumion instead of SketchUp. And there are a couple of other rendering softwares. I think there was Unreal that has been mentioned within this conference. The reason for ruling that out, and I'm just going to say it very honestly here, I think the learning curve of getting your model into it and bringing the quality up is a bit beyond me. I had taken some trials and bringing that up, but it was slightly more difficult than I had expected. So I don't know if I can do that in a conceptual rendering, kind of fast, quick, iterative design process. And I'm just going to not mention other names, but I'm just gonna go on. So this is an image that I got of Enscape, and it's just simple retail, imaginary mall project. So you may see kind of flimsy structures, but something that I made so that you can kind of see the grandeur of a space, the ceiling, the sculptural elements, and I just wanted to demonstrate that and how I do it here. First of all, let me just close Photoshop, as well as this model here. So typically what I do is that the Enscape screen, I keep it on the screen where my client or colleague will see, and I keep the SketchUp side on my screen so that I see the SketchUp. So, but there was going to be trouble splitting that, and I do want to show you what I'm doing on SketchUp side. So I'm just splitting in half, and there's parked one window one side, and SketchUp window on one side to demonstrate that, and just make those changes that I need to. So basically, whatever the changes that you make, including the view, if you synchronize, you'll be able to see on this side of the window. So this is what the right side of the window will be what the client or yourself as a colleague will be seeing, and the left side is what I'm looking at. Now, as we talk about this sculptural spiral staircase that is going on here, we can just discuss about it, whether we like it, whether we don't. Should it be there? Should there not be there? And if I decide to hide it, it goes away. If I decide to move it, and it moves away too. If you don't like the flock of birds, they're actually paper cranes. If you don't like it up there, I can bring it down. I can do so. If I want to change color of those stair treads, I can do it. So we can just discuss about it. If you don't like something, we can change it. And I think this allows that sort of iterative design process, as well as it makes the presentation to client a lot easier. And how am I doing in time? 15 minutes, all right. All right, so this allows those iterative design, and you can basically export an image, or I actually prefer using a method, because I mentioned something about the motion. So I'm just gonna make this big screen altogether, and actually just make this on its view. And I can use something like 3D mouse, like this one here. I don't have the one that has a lot of buttons on it, if you're aware of this product here. I just use this to navigate my views. So it's simple to move, but you can kind of gracefully move around the space. So if I want to show the staircase, I can just kind of go around and, okay, so do you like the staircase? Should it be there? We can just talk about it. And you can go fast if you want. Turn around. And there's no need for producing videos. Videos is just to send away if you need to on emails, but I think this is a far effective method. We can discuss and go to the place we want. We can go and talk about it. You can just also double click on the space that you want to go to, and then perhaps turn around, look around. Any question at this point? No? This is Enscape. You see the title at the very top right here. So you can just go up, down. I mean, if you can't really find a budget for that sort of thing, you can just completely rely on keyboard to go up, down. Mm-hmm.
Your backgrounds, is that in your SketchUp model, or is it the building
So,
facade, or is that in?
yeah, so the question is whether, how the background is formed. So if I go outside of this SketchUp model and look around, that's what you see on SketchUp. I'm just going to delete this section, it's a bit confusing. So it's a white infinite, but you do see adjacent buildings, which I just put down as like a background. My story here was that it's a retail area that's in a pedestrian walking street, and there's no vehicles around. It's sort of more intimate, and kind of wanted this white Apple Store-like, although it's kind of flimsy structure, but facade, and then this high ceiling with a lot of skylight that has these hanging structure in the middle with the spiral staircase that's taking you up to a mezzanine area, but I don't have to tell you that because you've just seen it. But you can narrate that as you show. But those things are immediately apparent, other than the fact that it was a pedestrian street. But as you take them out, yeah, you can kind of see what sort of environment it is, and it's easy to show that and make changes. So since I have a bit of time, what I'm going to do is hook up my fancy equipment. And I planned on having somebody come up and try it on because I think that's what happens with clients, because you'll have a client who's trying it for the very first time, never had this experience, and some people like it, some people don't. I've gotten mixed reviews, but they unifyingly agree the fact that it is very effective in gauging the space, the scale of things, because you start to realize it's like this table is closer than wall over there because you're seeing it two different images in here. And the reason why I wouldn't bring anyone up here, because you're putting this on in this platform, I don't want you to fall. So I'm not gonna, so I'll put me as a guinea pig. And there's always this aspect of live demo going wrong. So I don't want to jinx it. I probably did. And just click on that, and that should just kicking in. I do have the controllers here if I need to connect and use these to navigate around. This is sort of a double-edged sword, because how many of you actually got stuck in between walls and ceilings and everything in SketchUp? If you hand over a mouse someone who's not used to SketchUp, they're going to get stuck. And this is even worse. So I often stay away from giving them that access. I can either drive them on my model and just have them look around. Don't give them full control of doing so. If they're really savvy, they're going to do silly things. If they're not, they're just going to get stuck. And that's just my opinion. By giving a lot of experiences to different people, and I'm just going to wear this, and you have no idea what I'm seeing. So I'm just going to revert back to a different screen that you can see. So this is what I am seeing. If I have a remote control, I can actually point at things, but they can just kind of see, okay, so this little furniture that I'm seeing in front, you'll be able to see. So you can just kind of carry on conversations whilst doing that. And I see someone's trying to take a picture, so I'm just going to keep it steady. All right, so you can kind of keep doing that, and the same thing, I can just use this thing to move around, and I don't advise doing so unless you're very, very experienced with this, and it usually works. Yep, there you go. But it is very, very disorienting because I see things moving, but it isn't, so I tend to do kind of this, and I may fall in a way. So that's why what I tend to do is I'm just going to sit it down so that you're experiencing as if you're just wearing this. So you look forward or look around however you may be, and what I do often is that I unsynchronize the views. And it's probably auto-saving, so I'm going to let it do its thing. Whilst auto-saving, any questions? No? Okay.
How big is that model?
How big is that model? Actually, it was somewhere around 30 meg, because I was able to push it to warehouse, not extension warehouse, 3D warehouse. I generally don't put too many details for known reasons that I've been speaking about. So it's fairly light. And I was able to handle like a gig size of a model in this too. And what really matters is the poly and the material count rather than just the pure size of the model. That's what usually happens. But yeah, I've tested that too. And in my opinion, hands down, Enscape handles those complex models very, very well, given that your GPU is powerful enough. It's very dependent on it. So that was sort of a technical answer to that. And evidently it is struggling because it's having to keep up with my headset as well as SketchUp attempting to autosave or whatever it's doing. Give it a second or two or three.
when you're creating an interactive experience like this, do you find that you have to do more work because then your client can pretty much see everything? Then you have to populate everything.
That is partially true. Probably entirely true. And I think you should figure out everything as an architect. But it is true, you can't really have them just look on one angle. You're exposing them into VR world where you can just turn your head around everywhere. And no longer the days where you can just have a blank wall behind you and don't see any of these. Yeah, that is true, and I have encountered that before. But ideally, we're using this to design tool, not present. If you're designing a house that only has this angle of design and everything else is blank, I think you'll be running into more trouble. Did that kind of answer your question? Okay, so what I would do is I just go to a spot that I would like to go, somewhere around this music band going on, and then just turn on the synchronization of the view, and then drive them to that point, and then disable it immediately so that I don't move them in any way, because moving them can be very, very disorienting. I had few people who just had to run to and out into somewhere a bit more private. And I kind of say the VR is sort of a Marmite where some people will like it, some people will love it, whereas some people will hate it. And it's more dependent on the first time experience. If you don't get the first time experience right, the chances are it's really difficult to get them doing it. So I try my best to provide the very first time experience correct, and that leads into better presentation, actually discussing about design rather than just goofing up like, I can't see what and people start to ask, oh, what are you wearing inside? That sort of thing, because they've never seen these sort of things before. So I'm just gonna shut down VR headset just so that my computer can kind of rest. So just going back to the slideshow, I want to just kind of close off saying conceptual rendering is an effective design communication method, and it's a tool during the design process to achieve a better design altogether. I think more time, more feedback, perhaps it will lead to more work, but I think you can ultimately achieve a better design altogether. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. And I will leave a bunch of cards by here if you need to pick up my YouTube address or my email. I'm just gonna leave it right here.